Certainly, everybody's heard the news at this point that RFK Jr. has partially pulled out of the race and is backing Trump, potentially as a call it a quid pro quo, even though the term has been bastardized. An exchange in terms where RFK would get some kind of access to the new administration if Trump should win in November. What I'm going to do is kind of go over his speech, and he had a little bit of a talk in front of a Trump rally on Saturday as well. So try to dig in a little bit on what I think are some key topics, and then tell you what I think it means. So RFK hit the ground running. Basically said that the Democratic Party that he grew up with is no longer the Democratic Party that's there. Said the current Democratic Party is for censorship, for corruption, big pharma, big tech, big agriculture, and big money, and that it's abandoned democracy by not running a primary, that it essentially allowed a cognitive declined president to sit in place and lie about it until it could no longer be covered up. And these are the things that have kind of pushed him in this direction. RFK does have a very large volunteer organization. This could be beneficial to Trump. Obviously, not all of them are going to come over, but maybe a few. And in many ways, leftists are better at grassroots organizations than righties. So that in itself could be very beneficial. One thing RFK said was, in an honest system, he said he believed he would have won the election. I would lean that way. I think he would have had a really good chance. In fact, I would say it would have been in his favor. Now, for RFK, and I'm paraphrasing, the DNC waged war against RFK Jr.'s campaign as well as Trump's, legally attacking their every move, removing RFK from the ballot in some states, attempting to throw Trump in jail, running a sham primary. And then when the debates showed how poorly Biden was faring, they put Harris in, who had not received a single primary vote or delegate. By not speaking to the press, not presenting any policy statements, and the creation of a fawning propagandistic mainstream media, how does this look to the rest of the world? And this is something apparently very meaningful to RFK, because he kind of leans back into his dad and his uncle, talking about how they were very cognizant that the world looked to the United States as its template of how to do things. And this is pretty lowbrow stuff that's being pulled off right now, and probably makes us look pretty bad. He noted that Donald Trump was mentioned 147 times at the first day of the DNC, yet no policy statements were brought up. And he noted at the RNC convention, Biden was mentioned twice in 4 days. He also talked about how the government is in heavy collusion with media. Government agencies have been weaponized against the campaigns. Censorship via big tech has been occurring. How on earth can we lecture a country like Russia for doing things like this when we're doing it ourselves? A portion of the American populace may not be able to see this, but the rest of the world can. RFK stated that many months ago he promised to withdraw from the race if he had no chance of winning and could only fulfill a spoiler role. This is very telling to me about his personality, assuming it's an accurate description of how he believes and not, politics. Essentially, polling from his internal polls are showing that if he continues contesting the battleground states, he will hand the race over to the Democrats. And at this point in time, he disagrees with the Democrats to the point that he sees it as an existential threat to the United States. His name will remain on the ballot in the red and blue states, He'll be removing it from the battleground states. So watch to see if the Democratic Party starts suing to keep RFK on the ballot in those states. He believes that an election where nobody gets a majority of the electoral votes and being kicked to a contingent election is still a possibility under this scenario where he stays on the ballot in red and blue states and pulls off in the battleground states. Mathematically, it's possible. He is asking in those battleground states, when his name is removed from the ballot, please do not vote for him. Please do not write him in. Key elements he wanted to emphasize: free speech, the war in Ukraine, the war on our children. These are the main areas where he's in agreement with Donald Trump, and he believes Trump will improve the situation for those policy items. He described Ukraine as a comic book justification with a noble effort to stop a supervillain to thwart a Hitler-esque-like march across Europe, when this is totally false, and in actuality it's a proxy battle initiated by neocons. This does not absolve Russia from its responsibility in attacking Ukraine. However, the neocon project of relentless expansion of NATO into Ukraine, this was a predictable result. We unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear treaties with Russia. We now have nuclear-ready missile systems in Poland and Romania. By the way, I'm more or less quoting RFK here. The Ukraine war started in 2014 when agencies of the United States helped overthrow the democratically elected Ukrainian government. For RFK, the initial withdrawal of Russian troops following the primary invasion was due to a peace agreement that Ukraine and Russia agreed to and that the United States demands Zelensky tear up. Biden stated at that time that our goal was regime change. The Secretary of Defense stated that the goal was to degrade the Russian military. These are contrary to the goals being told to the American people, that of us stepping up to defend a benighted small country at the mercy of another. RFK described Ukraine as being a victim of the West. Potentially upwards to 600,000 Ukrainians are dead, the flower of their youth, because of this. The destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline and sanctions have crippled Western Europe's industrial base, making them less capable of defending themselves and more dependent on the US. The speech by Harris at the DNC would indicate that she's fully ready to embrace every single neocon plan on the future horizon. Trump says he plans to open negotiations with Putin and force a quick end to the fighting as soon as he becomes president. Per RFK, he said this alone justifies his support. Donald Trump has asked RFK to join his administration. Callie Means, who, by the way, was just had a long-form interview on Tucker Carlson, very much worth hearing. He's an advocate for fighting against the roots of chronic disease in the United States, which he believes is because of our industrialized food base, with uncounted harmful chemicals being allowed in by the federal government. He's been advising both the RFK campaign as well as the Trump campaign on how to fix these issues. This is also an area that RFK mentioned as being basically an area of commonality. If they're both being advised by somebody on this issue and they both buy into it, there's a lot of area where they can have cooperation. Basically, Means has been talking about how to fix these issues. RFK ended up, because of this, because Means called him and said, "Hey, you need to meet with Trump because I'm talking to him too, and there's a lot of common ground here." This resulted in RFK meeting Trump, his family, and his advisors 3 times in very long and how he described as tense discussions. The idea of a unity party was floated. Surprised to see how many areas of agreement they had, specifically ending the forever wars, ending childhood disease childhood disease epidemic and protecting freedom of speech. Also unraveling our corporate culture of regulatory agency capture and the U.S. intelligence agencies, putting them out of a job of surveilling and censoring U.S. citizens and interfering with our elections. RFK claims he attempted to engage the Biden administration and the Harris campaign. They both refused to speak to him. Per him, the cost of toxic food and pharmaceuticals on the public health dwarfs the cost of defense. Trump indicated that some newly independent commission on the assassination attempts against, actually, they weren't actual assassinations against JFK, RFK's father, and the attempted assassination against Trump. And their goal will be to release all remaining documentation on the JFK and RFK assassinations. They'd also empower the panel to work with RFK to investigate and fix the problem of chronic disease in the country, including diabetes, obesity, autism, and infertility. Foreign policy is currently in the grip of neocons. His goal would be to pry it free from that grip, rebuild the industrial base, and rebuild the middle class. In terms of censorship, he wants the United States to return to a free flow of information, which he believes is the foundation of his country. He said, never have the censors been the good guys, and the censors are never trying to protect you from false information. They're always trying to protect you from true information. He described Trump as the president who's going to make America healthy again. Well, play on the whole make America great again thing. Tells me there's extreme buy-in there. So here's the takeaways I get from all this. First, we looked and saw that Harris got very little bump from the convention. Watched to see the progress of RFK stepping away from the battleground state ballots as clues for the outcome. I imagine you'll see ticks of change within the RCP betting odds as these are either successful or thwarted. RFK Trump rhetoric points to him being in some way in charge of the FDA, NIH, Department of Agriculture, Department of Health, etc. One of those type positions rather than the CIA, where I'd really like to see him. This may be an indication of him being put in some kind of position as like a food health czar, where he would have control over various areas of the government in order to coordinate the changes he's trying to implement. Again, watch to see if the Democrats start fighting to keep RFK on the ballot in battleground states as RFK attempts to withdraw. Also watch to see if the Democrats keep going after RFK in the blue states. I found this very interesting that essentially you would think a place like New York would be pretty much absolutely safe for the Harris campaign, and they removed him from the New York ballot there via lawfare. That indicates to me that they don't feel as confident as they would. And that goes back to my previous video I was talking about. Don't read the polls, watch how they're reacting, because they're reacting to their own internal polls. Note that the Democrats are going after the Green Party and Cornel West in many of the states. Interestingly, the LP is running kind of a flaming lefty this year. Look to see if some of the big boy polls cause the Democrats to litigate against them as well. Now, with all of this, I would say this is a shakeup, as this election continues to have shakeups. It's not in any way a knockout blow. There's still a long way till November, but it looks like it's going to keep things interesting and will probably cause the Harris campaign to have to react in some way. You might see them ask for more debates, which is which would be an interesting thing. If they do ask for more debates, it means they are seeing themselves in an underdog position. If they stay with the one debate they've agreed to, then they think things are status quo. And if you see them try to get out of that last debate, that means they believe they're on top. The Democrats are now attempting to assert that Kennedy was working for Trump all along. Essentially, he was the entire time acting as a spoiler. I think this will end up proving false if RFK is given a meaningful position in the Trump administration. If he was merely a spoiler the entire time, I wouldn't expect any kind of follow-on deal. I think the inclusion of RFK is an indicator that the Trump administration is looking for a more meaningful attempt to downsize the DC bureaucracy. Not a given for by any chance. They're up against a lot. Trump completely failed the first time he went in, and we don't know how well deposed he is to doing this and whether he has the capability. RFK may add to the talent pool of functional outsiders that can enact change. He may have people who similarly see the same kind of problems that the Trump movement sees. And those might be people who actually have some know-how on how to do this. So, did you watch either of the events, RFK's announcement speech and RFK at a Trump rally? What did you think of it? One thing that pops into my head is he seemed a little bit ill at ease at the rally. I don't think he's used to speaking at the cadence of a crowd that's that interactive. Uh, there's a certain break pattern you need to use. Speak and stop, deal with the applause, which Trump knows how to do very well, and that might be kind of new to RFK. I don't know if you saw that. I'd be interested in your take on that. Also, what do you think this means? Does this change the outcome of the election? Does it make things more interesting? If they do get elected, does RFK end up in a meaningful position? And does that meaningful position actually lead to change? Yep, that's all I can think of on that. But there's a lot going on. So anything you want to talk about on this in the comments, feel free. Please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithm brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, check out my other titles. I get into a lot of things. Sure, you'll find things you'll like. Consider subscribing, and if you know someone will find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.